What's up guys, welcome to my video series on Mythic Plus Dungeons. Today we're going over Eye of Azshara and just going over things like mechanics for trash and boss, route choices, mob counts, mechanics, and so on. So I won't be able to do everything or go over every little tip, trick, cheese, and so on because one, I don't know them all, and two, there's not enough time in the video. If you do have some cool strats or cheeses or anything like that that you do know and want to share, feel free to do so in the comments section below. Now this first pack that we're pulling here, Stormweaver is a caster. You want to interrupt the storm channel that she does, as well as arc lightning later if you get around to it, especially on high fortified weeks. And this warrior, just a melee mob, and it enrages at a certain percentage of health. And then we pull this next pack here, which is the exact same. Now note on teaming weeks, that first pack will have a Wrangler ad in there, and that one casts Lightning Rod, which you really want to stop with stuns, grips, things like that, interrupts of the CC variety. You cannot actually interrupt it with, say, a regular kick. So if you want, you can of course pull both of those packs together if your group is able to and the affixes are kind enough, as well as the brute down here, the Crusher, that we will pull next. Now this Crusher, it's pretty simple. It does two abilities. One is Mighty Slam, it just hits the tank fairly hard, and the other is a Thundering Stomp, which you do want to interrupt with some sort of kick. And we don't here, and what it does if you don't is it just hits everyone and does damage and stuns them briefly, as you can see here. On teaming weeks, there will be a Crusher that will pat down the path that we're going to go up in just a little bit, so be sure you handle that or avoid it if you want to, but it does tend to cut across where you want to go. So there's another Thundering Stomp, interrupt that, and then we move on. Now these two Naga up here, one of them is the Stormweaver on the left, which is the same mob we've just fought a couple times, and the other is an Oracle, which has an Arcane Bolt spam and heals with Rejuvenating Water, so make sure you do interrupt the Rejuvenating Waters, otherwise they will get a significant amount of healing. We accidentally pull the turtle here, generally we don't want to, but it's not a big deal if you do. It is mob count anyway, and you can stop that spiked carapace by stunning it, CCing it, and so on, so do make sure you do that when you're ready to kill it. Let me just finish it up here. The next pack is an Oracle and two Warriors, so those are those melee mobs plus the healer. So kill whatever you want first depending on the affixes. Things like Necrotic that might prioritize killing melee ads might have you killing the Warriors first. Oracle is generally a good choice though, so you don't have to interrupt it over and over and over. But remember just to interrupt or heal. And then if you need to, you can kite the Warriors when they get big and scary, especially on things like Raging Week, in which they get extra strong when they drop below that health point, and things like that. Or maybe Necrotic as well if you've built up a lot of stacks because they just keep hitting you over and over. Now the first boss that we're going to fight here summons two ads as one of his mechanics, and it's important that you handle them correctly. You will want one of them in general to block the spear ability he does. So generally you won't want to kill one, it's up to you and your group which one you want to leave alive. You can leave the caster, who does have a heal, which you can interrupt just like the Oracles. Or you can leave the melee ad. The caster's easier to keep in place because she just casts. But again, you have to worry about interrupting her heal if you kind of mess up. Now the other ability he does is Crashing Wave, and he will charge at the tank, and the tank just want to point it away from everyone, and melee need to get away from him so they don't get clipped by it. So here it goes, Crashing Wave, and it hurts a lot. And it leaves this crap in the ground, and then he will throw this Impaling Spear. Now, the idea is to use an ad to intercept the spear, but you can also use immunities. So things like Ice Block, which the mage did there, Blessing Protection, Aspect of the Turtle, stuff like that. If someone does get hit, they are stunned for a significant amount of time, and they take a lot of ticking damage. Same thing happens to the ad if they intercept it, so they'll generally die from the spear. And that's pretty much it for this boss, so melee, just be extra aware of Crashing Wave, because it can one-shot you, especially on high keys or tyrannical. And then either use immunities to intercept or just handle the spear, or, you know, put an ad between the person that's supposed to be taking it. Now, this mob, the Arcanist, you want to interrupt generally Arcane Rebound. It's the only damaging ability it does that's unavoidable. The other stuff like Polymorph Fish can be dispelled, so I don't really prioritize that too much. As well as Aqua Spout, which does do damage potentially, but also is completely avoidable. You just move out of the swirls and it does nothing. So on higher keys or Raging, when she gets low, I tend to like to focus on Arcane Rebound pretty much for interrupts as a whole. Now sometimes she will be down by the blobs, so she does pat up and down the path, so it depends on where you catch her and what kind of affixes you're dealing with that you might want to pull her away, because those mobs are neutral. and they can cause some trouble with stuff like, for example, necrotic, if they put lots of stacks on you, or they might root you during Aqua Spout, making you unable to move, and then you just take huge damage for no reason. Now, I generally try to avoid pulling other stuff in here. On teaming weeks, the Arcanists are accompanied by these giant elementals, but they're not put in together, like they're not aggroed together. So I recommend not actually pulling them together or pulling the water elementals at all, because they really suck to deal with. Now here I ended up pulling these droplets, and depending on the week, you might want to avoid them. Things like explosive can be rather nasty or bolstering if you don't handle them correctly. But on other weeks or easier weeks, or even on those weeks, if you want to, you can pull those 2 droplet packs together. There's one by the boss as well that you do need to clear out just in case, because you need to move around quite a bit during that fight. So I do recommend pulling those at some point, and if you're confident, you can pull both groups together. Now here's another Arcanist. We accidentally pull Snail, and the snails are neutral mobs, but they give a decent amount of mob count, 1.94%, and their damage is 100% avoidable. So they can be good on weeks like bolstering, again, explosive, where you want to avoid large packs of enemies, and instead focus on single ones. They do an abrasive slime that basically hits in front of them and to their sides, so as long as you're behind them or out of range, you will not get hit by them. So you can avoid all their damage completely. And again, if you want to, you can pull them, and they're worth a decent amount. And if you want to and you accidentally pull them, they're actually leash very, very easily, so you can actually run away from their aggro radius and they will eventually reset. So you don't have to kill them, but again, they are worth a decent amount of mob count, so it can be worthwhile depending on your fixes and the group. So as we finish up these snails, we're going to move over to the little blobs by the boss. And I actually hit a little bit of lag here, so it's going to freeze up for a little bit. But basically, same thing with the blobs. You do, again, want to kill them before the boss goes, because they can interfere with the boss. She spawns more blobs, and it can just be really, really annoying. So you just want to make sure that you do take care of them beforehand. And if you're using something like Sanguine, make sure you kill them outside of the fight zone, because you don't want to have to deal with that while you're actually dealing with the second boss. Now you can skip this boss and go to the Serpentrix boss first if you like, but it's more important, I think, to not be blown around on this fight rather than dealing with seagulls, which aren't that bad because you can handle those before the fight on the third boss, but totally up to you guys, your group, and what you like. So you pull the boss here, the first thing she does is this lightning, the static nova, and you want to be on land for this, so make sure everyone's standing on a bit of land so they don't get stunned and take a huge chunk of damage. It has been known to bug sometimes, like even if you're in the middle of the island, the game thinks you're not, so that sucks if that happens, but try to deal with it as best you can. Now, Curse of the Witch is a debuff, and basically it makes you sneeze after a while. It's a curse, and you can dispel it, but it makes you sneeze in front of you. Now, if you sneeze on the ads, you'll see here, you actually one-shot them. So they actually hit me on purpose so that we can kill all the ads, and I do recommend you do that as much as possible. Now, do be aware that if you sneeze during this Focus Lightning, which is coming up, then it can be really dangerous. Well, that happened, actually. It can be really dangerous because you can knock people into the water for the Static Nova and get them killed. The Focus Lightning that happened before, pretty simple. You just want to stand in water, but don't stack on each other because it's dangerous and it makes you take more damage. You get multiple hits. And then finally, tornadoes, as you've seen spawn up probably. They have a little cloud animation before they spawn. And then they will destroy islands, so be aware of that and try to manage around it. And as you can see, mostly Curse of the Witch is being pointed away when there's no ads up. Now there are some ads, so if we get, another Curse of the Witch, so the next one that we do get, we will want to sneeze on them and get them killed. Again, Static Nova, back to land, and you just kind of rinse and repeat, dodging tornadoes, dodging just her different abilities, and again, staying in water for Focus Lightning, but not stacking. Other thing to note is when you kill those blobs, it can be dangerous. Remember that they do apply that movement slow that can turn into a root if you kill enough of them. So just be prepared to use something to either immune that, like a magic immunity, or just a movement break, like a Hand of Freedom kind of thing, or Blessing of Freedom, Wraith Walk, stuff like that. Now, up here you have a lot of choices on what you want to pull for mob count. You don't necessarily have to pull these crabs to prevent them from being pulled on the boss, but there are some mobs that generally you always want to pull before the boss because they do pat around the area that you can possibly fight him in. Now I decided to pull these because they're really easy to kill. They do apply a slow, as you can see. They just attack the aggro target with that debuff. But other than that, they don't do anything special. Again, anything you do here, you can pull bigger depending on the fixes and how confident you are in your team. Now this crab is pretty simple. It just casts armor shell, which you can interrupt. Very simple, very easy mob. And then you notice the seagull behind us, which will actually get pulled. What you can do with the seagulls, besides kill them, is you can use a full CC, things like paralysis, sap, repentance, whatever, anything like that. And if you let it expire the full way, they will actually fly up and get out of the combat zone. So you can do that if you want to just avoid pulling them. They do give a little bit of mob count now. But either way, I either recommend you do that or you kill them before the boss fight. Because if you pull one during this third boss, it's a real pain in the ass. Now this big Hydra is rather dangerous. He does two versions of this. He does Rolling Storm, this lightning, and you just dodge the swirls and goes in front of him. And the other is Chaotic Lightning or Chaotic Storm. And it basically does the same thing, but just in any direction. He also does a Tail Swipe. It's actually Chaotic Tempest, but he does a tail swipe as well, so never stand behind him. So, TLDR on the Hydra, just make sure that you actually dodge all the swirls. Pretty simple, and nothing too complicated there, and don't stand behind him. So here I decided to pull these crabs. These don't always pull, but it can be safe to do so, just in case, because you never know. And again, they're very easy. They're decent mob count, they don't take long to kill, even on something like bolstering. Just be aware, explosive can be an issue, or bursting as well, anything that kind of feeds off of multiple ads dying quickly. And then we have another seagull up here, and because this was a pug group, I didn't necessarily trust that they wouldn't pull him. And this crab pack that does pat is very important to pull. They literally pat right around the boss area, so you pretty much have to kill them beforehand. Otherwise you're going to run into some trouble on the boss. Now with the seagull, if you're going to kill it, just be aware that it will disorient the aggro target, generally the tank. So you can either try to kill it really fast before it does that, or when you get the feeling that it's going to do it soon, you can stun it so that you prevent it from actually doing anything or disorienting the tank. You will want to pull this Hydra. It does pat pretty far, so even if it looks like it's out of range, it will come back eventually. So you want to make sure that you do handle it. Again, same thing. It's got the two lightning abilities. You just dodge the swirls. And it's got a tail swipe, so just avoid that. Now, whether or not you choose to pull these singly, if you're not certain about your group or their capabilities, or whether you choose to pull a lot of this together, the point is just to clear the area around of this boss before engaging it. Now, generally, you will want to pull the seagull as well. It's up here. And then there will be a red crab as well. And then I think another blue crab that we didn't pull yet. So we pull the seagull so we can focus on it and kill it fast. And I also pull this red crab. Now this one does two abilities. The first is spray sand, and it's pretty simple. You move out from in front of it, or you can use a CC like a stun or a grip to stop it once it starts channeling. And it just hurts a lot if you stand in it. It also casts Sandstorm, which just puts a little splashy debuff on the ground, and you just don't stand in it. As you can see there, it is pulsing on this person. So it doesn't do too much, though. I wouldn't worry about that one too much. And then I go and pull this last crab. That one over there you can pull earlier. I forgot about it, honestly. And then I saw it there because the head can spawn up there, so you do want to pull it. And again, it's the armor shell one, just interrupt the armor shell. Now, the mob count, there's a lot of freedom you have while going around this area. There's a bunch of crabs over in the area of the forest to my right, where I'm currently looking. And you can use that if you want to. You'll have some mob count choices later on as well, where you can pick what you want to kill. There's like single giants that give lots and lots of mob count, and there are smaller packs that are kind of up to you, and we'll go over those a bit more in detail once we get there. So for this boss, we start off here. There's a couple abilities. Toxic Wound is one. If you get that, you have a debuff, and it basically makes you poop out green stuff. So you can see this warrior will start pooping out green void zones, and you don't want to stand in those, and don't put them on people if you can help it. The other is this acid spray type thing, where you just move out of the swirl. It's a lot easier to dodge now. It's poison spit, and you just stay out of it. Now, do note that his aggro radius is quite small, so as a tank, you want to be careful that you don't get out of range of him. Now, every 33%, he does transition, and he will submerge, and two heads will come up. One's arcane, which is purple, and one is fire, that you just saw there, which is red. And you want to send your DPS to go kill those heads. Interrupt their cast, you can stun them as well. So make sure you just try to prevent them from taking damage, or producing damage as much as possible. And once they're dead, then you want people to come back and handle the head and push them down to 33%. And then you'll rinse and repeat. Now, for healers, just be aware that people are going to be pretty damn spread. So it can be really dangerous on stuff like Grievous, for example, when people get low and they start stacking up that Grievous dot. So you might want to set a point like, hey, come here for heals, or maybe mark the healer so it's easier to see where they are. Stuff like that. But you will get out of range quite a bit on this fight. Now, when he goes submerged the second time, you come down here, you want to interrupt him, so the tank should go to the green head every time to make sure he's tanked, and interrupt his rampage. And he only does rampage once when he spawns the second time from submerge, and also if you get out of range of him, if nobody's in melee range of him in other phases. So again, tanks, just be aware, very, very small aggro radius. Be very close to the edge of the pool, otherwise he might turn and swing at a melee, or start casting rampage. So that's it for this boss pretty much. Just make sure the ad heads are handled, the purple and red ones, and make sure they die before BPS come to join the tank on the boss. Now here I generally will pull these crabs, but again, it's up to you how you want to handle mob count. Again, they find these very, very simple, pretty much on any affix, as long as you're handling it properly. They're just not hard to kill. Very simple, very easy, and they get you quick mob counts. I'll pull another crab pack over here. So again, same reasoning, and again, there are more of these if you really want them to my left now. Again, in this kind of grassy, foresty zone. If you really need them, but generally you won't. There will be other packs like of Murlocs that you can pick up later, as well as solo giants that give a lot of percentage. Now up here, there is a Murloc pack that does pat, and they pat very, very far. And we kind of make a bit of a miscall, I think, here, to wait for this Murloc pack. I'm like, sure, let's do it. But I'll just discuss some of the options we have here. Now, Murloc pack, again, one of them does pat up and down. So on weeks like this, that I took this video in, with bolstering, explosive, bursting, stuff like that, you might want to pull them separately because there is another pack with lots of mobs in it in the cave that you will have to pull. Or you can kind of just pull them together if you're confident. Now, like I said, there's a lot of mobs. There's this crab here, there's the giant that's sitting right there, and if you don't want to deal with a lot of stuff like explosive or bursting or bolstering, then the giants can be a good choice. This particular one does give 4.85%, so it's quite a bit of meat. It's quite a meaty addition to your mob count. But here comes the pack, and just note that there is a Skulker, which is a higher health mob than the rest of them. So on weeks like, again, bolstering, you will want to kill it first or CC it and then pull the rest of the pack away from it out of range of bolstering, which is about 30 yards, I believe. But anyway, you just kill this pack and then move on. Now in the cave, there is just a pack of random stuff, and these are all the same kind of health mobs. Again, they don't really do much. They apply poisons, so some magic damage and dots to the tank. So just be aware of that. And if you need to dispel it, if you can, or use some sort of damage reduction or magic damage immunity. In addition, there is a snail, and you'll generally want to avoid it, but again, you can kill it if you want, or if it gets to be too much of a pain, you can just let it leash, so kind of move away from it and let it reset on its own. So these are the little mobs that do put some dots on. So they do hurt quite a bit. Be prepared for that as a tank and as a healer. And then here we've actually managed to pull the snail and bolster it to all hell. So it's rather dangerous. As you can see, it actually one-shots the warrior who wasn't really paying attention. We make a bit of a miscall here. It's really not worth killing this at this point, considering how bolstered it is, and it's only worth 1.94%. But again, we decide to, for whatever reason. I guess I didn't trust that we'd be able to handle it, and plus I wasn't sure if anyone was going to res the warrior again because he did die. So someone does end up, and we should have just pulled on, but again, up to you how you want to handle this kind of stuff. Now, going forward, the mob count you want is the last 4. They actually give you mob count now. So the 4 Naga before the final boss will give you enough, and they're 1.94% each. So the count you want before you go to those 4 is 92.24%. If you have at least that much, then you're good to go without any more trash. And if you're going to kill the giants, the 2 giants that are almost unavoidable up front, then you're going to need 82.54%. So just have that, keep that number in mind. So in this case, we actually need a little bit more mob count, so I decided to pull, I believe, a seagull and a snail up ahead. But there, as you can see, there are giants over here to the left. Further ahead, there's Murloc packs to the right here. All sorts of options. Now, one note on the 2 giants that are guarding the path to the 3rd boss. You can skip them if you have one person suicide in, so preferably a tank, most likely. So have the tank pull them off to one side, choose left or right, and then the rest of the group follows in afterward to the opposite end. So if the tank goes left, then the whole group goes right, and if the tank goes right, the whole group goes left. I like to have the tank pull them to the left, though, if you do that, because there's more space to maneuver on the right. And then the tank dies, nobody does anything. Make sure you don't have any passive heals like Rest of Druid, Sarah's Gift, or anything that activate and aggro them, and they should end up not aggroing, they'll reset, and then you can rest the tank. Now, if you're going to pull them and kill them, I suggest killing the Wave Crasher first. He does do the stun, the Rising Fury, which is really annoying, and the other guy's stuff, the Aqua Spout, is all avoidable, so you can just move out of it, those blue swirls. Now you can see the stun is dangerous, so make sure you actually clear the blue swirls as soon as possible. As soon as they spawn, get out of them, because the other guy does tend to stomp pretty soon afterwards. You don't want to get stunned in one of those. They do spawn Murlocs as well, so be aware of that. And then just kind of handle them. They do hurt a lot too. On necrotic weeks, they can stack up quite high, depending, because of the Murlocs just smacking you as well, so just be aware of that and handle them the best you can. They do hurt a lot, especially on fortified weeks, so that's why sometimes you will choose to skip them if possible. Now, they do see through stealth, at least player stealth. I haven't tested it with invisibility potions, but I know they do see through stuff like rogue stealth and cat stealth, so you can't just skip through them that way, I don't believe. Once you're done, you will have to still kill the Murlocs if there are any left. They don't really give you anything, but you know, they're aggroed on you, so you want to kill them. And we can see, you know, I have plenty of mob count. We had plenty going in, and we have plenty going to the last 4. So just keep an eye on that and kind of adjust your pools to what you need to achieve those numbers. Now there's a seagull up here, so you might consider actually, you know, CCing it so it goes away during the fight, or just pulling it before the boss if you're not confident that you won't pull it. Now for this boss, he's got some interesting mechanics and just a few to note. The first is he will put bubbles on people, and it's very important that they actually take these bubbles off, and you do so by taking damage. This lightning that's just environmental works, the quake that he does works, the little swirls work, anything, because if they go off on a big key, or like a really, really high level key or tyrannical weak, it hurts a lot. Now, the ground stone that you just saw go off, you just dodge as a tank or anyone who happens to be close, so just make sure you don't stand in it like I did, which is really bad, does lots of damage. Quake will put this little puff of smoke under your feet, and you basically want to not stand in it unless you're trying to break a bubble. It does a significant amount of damage. I believe it also comes out of old quakes, so those little cracks on the ground you see, it will reactivate those as well as wherever you are standing this time. So other than that, it's just these water swirls, and again, you just avoid them in general, but you can use them to help break your bubbles if you are afflicted by that. Now, he also enrages at about 30%, so just be aware of that the damage will ramp up on the tank at this point. And if you're worried about things like necrotic for the tank, you can move when he does ground time. It's his longest ability where he just sits there. So you can try to get some distance during that time and kite him around, or of course have a DPS taunt off briefly if you need. So that's all for this boss. Just want to make sure you do the abilities correctly, handle his damage. Here he enrages, so you expect his damage to go up significantly. And you just prepare for that, maybe roll some cooldowns and stuff like that. Now after this, if you still need mob count, there is a seagull in the little corridor where you jump down to the ship. There's also a snail. Again, that'll be another 1.94% for you on non-teaming weeks, of course. And so you can stock up on that, or you can kill other mobs down after you've killed the boss or something like that. So generally I like to have mob count ready before we go down, because it sucks to have to go find some trash afterward. But kind of up to you and what your group has done, what you've pulled, and what you're comfortable with. Now these 4 are all fairly similar. They do lightning bolts, which you do want to interrupt if possible, especially on high fortified weeks or raging, and once they get below the threshold and start one-shotting people. This one does Aqua Spout, which you want to move out of course. Just get out of the swirls. Lightning bolt's just that basic ability that you want to interrupt, and they also cast Arcane Bomb. Now this debuff will stay on someone until it gets dispelled, and then it stays on them, or it stays where it was dispelled rather than following the person. If you stand in it, or if it doesn't get dispelled at all, it will explode for a bunch of damage on the person and in the area, and stun them for a few seconds. Now this mob, same thing, you want to interrupt Lightning Blast. It also does Polymorph Fish, which again, not a big deal, just have your healer dispel it. and then interrupt lightning blast as much as possible. So this one's particularly simple, and I think it also does arcane bomb if you give it the chance, but again, just the same mechanics over and over. This third one does some of the same stuff. What's important on this one is it does magic binding. Now if you're on a high fortified key, you want to be aware that magic binding does a lot of damage, again, especially if it's raging. So if you can immune it, like with anti-magic shell, like I just did, or a dispel from the healer, or a freedom of some sort, blessing of freedom, wraithwalk, shapeshifting druids, stuff like that, then do so to help reduce the damage. And then of course she does arcane bomb as well, so get that dispelled by the healer and then move out of it. This one, similar story, just it also casts storm, so just make sure you interrupt that at some point before it starts doing too much damage in the area. Now for this boss, you got a couple options. You could have heroed or bloodlusted on the third boss, depending on if you think you have trouble with him, or you can save it for this boss because it's pretty nasty. If you are confident you can kill him pretty quickly and just want to maximize damage, do it at the start. But if you're not confident and you think you might have some trouble on the later parts, then use it at 10%, because 10% is when he goes into his pseudo enrage, kind of soft enrage, and he starts going freaking wild. So he starts at 20%, so execute class is very good for this guy. And we start by pulling, and there's a couple abilities. He will summon tornadoes you want to stand out of. Lightning's still happening all over the place. And, of course, violent winds is still a thing, so you're getting shoved around. Now, Massive Deluge is an ability he will cast on the tank. You see that big, giant teal swirl? Just stay out of it, everyone. Now, the next ability cast looks kind of similar-ish. It's Crushing Depths, and you should stack together with this. So, everyone splits the damage. You can also immunity it. So any immunities like Ice Block, Aspect of the Turtle, stuff like that works. Blessing of Protection also works as well. So if you have a Paladin, you can use it on someone who doesn't have an immunity, and everyone can just get out of it and it won't do any damage. Now at 10%, he starts doing all this stuff more and more. So more things happen. More tornadoes, more waves. And you can see the waves coming around. Just don't get hit by them, they hurt. Tornadoes will knock you up in the air. And he also does Arcane Bomb, so make sure that is dispelled. And if it's not dispelled, make sure you have some sort of magic immunity perhaps, or big defensive, or some sort of stun immunity. One thing to note on this boss is that you do want to be careful of getting out of range of the healer, because you can, you know, in dodging everything, you might just end up running all over the place. So try to maybe mark the healer or have a place you come back to be safe, like to get heals, that you can guaranteed get heals, things like that. But this guy is a little bit crazy. Just make sure you handle the mechanics, dodging as much as you can, and doing what you can to kind of choose the Crushing Depths when possible to ease up the burden on your healer. So if you guys like this video, please feel free to hit it with a like. Leave any comments, questions that you have in the comment section below, or tips of your own if you like, and I hope you guys enjoyed and found it useful. Thanks for watching, guys. Cheers.